Well, welcome to our latest episode of the LiveWell Hervey podcast series, of course, funded and driven by Social Shift, who are making change in our community, and we thank them and the Hervey Bay Neighbourhood Centre for their support. Today, I have the principal of St James Lutheran College, Mr Luke Schoff, with me. We're going to explore how important it is to stay educated, not just as a child, but throughout your whole life. How are you, Luke?
I'm really good, Malcolm. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good, mate. Yeah. You've come in there with a bit of energy, so I'm going to have to match it.
Oh, no, I'm not sure about that. But yeah, look, thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to having a chat.
So I've got a bit of a view about education now, particularly when it's an organisation the size of yours, that it's in the role that you have. You're more of a CEO than you are a hands-on educator day to day, but the genesis of who you are and your belief system is still about delivering quality education for people. Yeah. That's the purpose of it.
Yeah, absolutely. School principalship now is not what it used to be, and I think that's a really good thing. I think education, like all industries, has grown and changed. We're probably being a little bit late. Maybe we can explore this today a little bit. Yeah. We've probably been a little bit late in many ways, and there's a whole range of reasons by that. But no, we have grown and changed, and the role of principal now is a really multifaceted one, but it's still one of the most exciting things, and I love it. I think it's the most wonderful thing I can do. But yeah, I'd love to explore that with you today.
Well, this is just to give people an understanding, and I'm not just talking about St James, we're talking about like many schools, many private schools and public. You've got a huge amount of staff. It's a big undertaking. Yeah, like it's not just like you turn up and the government puts it all on for you and you go. It's a different thing. Yeah,
and it's also a business that has to run efficiently and meet KPIs and make sure that we're and we have all the standards and expectations that you would have of any normal employer. But the other thing and the most amazing thing we're doing is we're taking people's flesh and blood every day.
That's the thing.
And partnering with them and educating them and walking alongside them on their learning journey through the real formative years. And I think that's what I love about it, but I think it's what makes it so challenging, whatever school you're in, sure. Independent, Catholic, private, and in the department. It's a challenging but very rewarding job.
Yeah, and parents' expectations as well. I mean, I guess, there's always that debate that, we're not here to, we're here to educate your kids, but we're not here to be their babysitters, teach them life values and all the rest. That's a fine line because they spend so much time with teachers, and I think sometimes parents' expectations are unrealistic. Yeah. Probably hard for you to say that, but I think, education is such a intrinsic part of our life. And when we have figured out ourselves how to get up off the ground and start crawling and start walking, we're self-educating. Did you always want to be a teacher? Was that all you did?
Yeah, I did. And I grew up in rural New South Wales. I grew up on a farm. My parents were primary producers, and however, I had some older brother and sister both went off to university and became teachers as well. And as the youngest of my family, I guess I saw that. And from a very young age, I just remember wanting to be a teacher. And I wanted to be a teacher of young children, not actually secondary age kids. Teenagers scared me.
Okay. They still scare me.
Yeah, no, a little bit as well, although so do really young children too sometimes. But I've always wanted to be a teacher and still see myself, as people ask, what are you? The first thing I say is a teacher.
Gotcha.
I'm also a principal. On the card on a plane when you're returning the immigration form.
What's your occupation?
What do you write there? What do you write there?
Oh, that's a great question. There's so many jobs. Normally, I just put sales.
Right. Well, see, I still put teacher. Right. I don't put principal because that's what I am. And that's, what defines me, I think, a little bit, and what I'm passionate about. I love principalship, don't get me wrong, but, I love it. And if I'm having a bit of a tough day or a bad day like we all have occasionally, there's nothing better than just walking up down to one of my primary school classrooms and just coming in. And the teachers just know it too. They'll go, man, it's just coming in and sitting down with the kids in the year 3 class. So you must be having one of those days. And that's what fills my bucket.
And the thing about that, right, that I find really interesting as an outsider looking in who does not understand the school model at all, has the perception that you are would be so constrained by the machine that those schools are, that you almost lose a little bit of touch with the teaching, where you have just flipped that and said, no, mate, that's my base. That's my base.
And it is, and it really is sometimes, and on particular days, here I am today during the school day doing this and connecting, and so part of my role is sometimes really draws you out of what the core is what you do, and that's what us principals, all of us need to do, that don't have that direct contact as much as our classroom teachers is. If you lose touch with that, then you may as well not be a principal.
But if I'm reading this right, what I'm picking up from you is that that's your purpose. That's what drives you.
Yeah, absolutely.
To be an educator and a teacher, that's what drives you to get the outcomes that come further up the line as you go up and take on different roles within the organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's still the core of what you do.
Yeah. So I have a view that you can never stop learning, and I'm one of those people who always self-analyzes the things that I do, and I come to the conclusion that I'm better today than I was yesterday, but I wish I knew that yesterday, which is almost impossible, of course.
Yep.
And a part of that comes through the life's journey and learning and staying in environments where we learn. And of course, that's really structured when we're younger.
Yeah.
We go through, kindy and preschool and primary and secondary, and some people go into tertiary education and all the rest of it. But then after that, how do you keep that journey going? But what I'd like to know from you is how at an early age do you start to set up those building blocks as a teacher? How do you set up those building blocks for kids that they're not just come to school for this year and next year, that they're embracing a life of discovery and taking on new experiences?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this. We touched on it a bit earlier how education's changed, and that's just a wonderful thing. We would sometimes say that there's things that's crept into schools that really we feel like sometimes that no, this something is this. There needs to be more on with the parents' side, right?
Yeah.
But there's some things that have changed which are really important on this piece, Malcolm. Which is, we used to have this idea that formal education from primary school, secondary school, and for some people down the tertiary pathway was the time. That was the learning time, and then after that, you went off into your job.
Yep.
Whatever that may be. And this is the old industrial model that we're talking about. And you're done. You'd finished your learning, and now you go and enter the economy and the workforce, and you just do that. What's great about how education is seen now is that it's a beginning, that we're partnering with parents all the time now whilst they're on their formative years and before they're independent adults. But there's this real focus on, we're not creating just students that know something and know the subjects well. We're creating learners.
Yeah.
But we're creating learners and walking along people to be learners for their life. So terms like lifelong learners have been now something that we've been saying for some time in schools, which I just think is awesome. Now, I'm not up for cliches and catchphrases, but that does actually encapsulate how we see it now, that we realise that regardless of where you want to be when you finish year 12, which is what my organisation sort of works towards people to kind of go, well, we've got to get to that point, and after that I'm not involved in tertiary or other education, that they continue learning, not that it's done now and they're out in the job. And that's because now the amount of careers people have, not just jobs we're talking, but the amount of careers people have are far more than what they used to be. Indeed. People change careers so much more. In order to do that, you've got to keep on learning. How does that happen? If we haven't equipped people with skills for further learning and becoming inquirers, becoming inquisitive, and I'm probably getting into the technical aspect now for our listeners right now, but if you're not an inquirer, which means if you're not thirsty for finding out more about something, and you encapsulated a little bit there in your statement about, well, I want to learn every day, I want to be a bit better than I was yesterday, and I wish I knew what I knew yesterday today, is in that process of actually learning. So the way we do learning in schools now generally is through an inquiry model, because that's how we do life.
And I think, would you say that that's a generational change? And what I mean by that is, so if I went out on the street right now and found another 10 blokes in the early 50s just like me, and I said to all of them, in the last 12 months, what was something that you applied yourself to that didn't have anything to do with your current job or life, just to learn something new, I'd be struggling to say 7 out of 10 would have done anything.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a generational thing? Do you think it's came into vogue in, say, our kids' era, where they are now thinking, hang on a minute, you know, I don't want the same job for 35 years.
Yeah.
We have people in our organisation who have had more jobs in the last 5 years than I've had in my entire life.
Yeah.
That's just the way that it goes. But as you say, you've got to stay nimble. You've got to stay with things.
Yeah.
But that has to start at the beginning, doesn't it? Like, they can't cotton on to that when they're 20.
Yeah, that's right. Look, there's some things. We have a wealth now of information at our hands than what our parents didn't have. And I'm not just going to say it's because of the internet, but because of being increasingly connected, because of increases in our understandings of how our brain works. You know, the access now that we have to MRI machines and how we can now have access to them to put people in certain situations where we're not, you know, harming them in any way. We're just simply analysing brain patterns when certain stimuli happen. We know so much more.
Yes.
And you know, maybe it's only the last, and I don't have any data on this right now in front of me, but, you know, in the last 20 years, there has been an explosion in our understanding. So, yeah, I think you're right. That analogy of, you know, people in their maybe 50s right now not understanding that concept is we know so much more now, and therefore we're applying it in education to and not just in primary and secondary education, but also in tertiary education and in all other training facilities that we know so much more about this, that we are much more nimble. I really like that word, Malcolm, that you used then. We are needing to be far more nimble, but we know we can be.
That's a self-awareness situation, isn't it? Because as you rightly say, like when I was a child, I grew up with Encyclopedia Britannica. And, you know, if I really wanted to know something, I could go and find it out. If I really was motivated to. Right? But now, all I got to do is pick up my phone, and there is literally no question that I cannot get the answer for. And I do think back to my Year 10 teacher who did say to me, listen, mate, you won't be carrying a calculator around with you everywhere you go. Like,
that's right.
Well, joke's on you, pal.
Yeah, that's right. It's in your pocket right now, and it does far much more than just a calculator. But that's an example. That's a really great example, Malcolm, of where we're at now and how we have this marvellous opportunity. So it's actually not that we were really doing anything wrong 35, 40, 50 years ago. We're just doing the best we can with what we had. And we have so much more now, and we do know now that we have that access right at our fingertips of so much more that can help us take things further, learn new things, and be nimble.
Well, it's self-evolution, I think, because
it is.
Now we are understanding that we can absorb information at a higher capacity and then implement that in an easier way. And I think the way that you could perhaps measure that in a commerce sense would be what happens to our operations if the internet goes down. Everything comes to us grinding halt. No one can do anything. They're all like, might as well go home.
Yeah, that's right.
We can't do anything.
Yeah.
Right? That's because we've geared up to run at a certain level, and that's supported by a mechanism that allows us to do it, which didn't happen in previous generations. So you're dead right. But it is sometimes, I think, built on a bit of a house of cards, because if that infrastructure is taken away, then we're all standing around. Have we even lost common sense as a result of being intellectually smarter and ability?
You probably touched on a point that needs another whole podcast,
I get you,
right?
Yeah. I realised as soon as I said that, I realised I probably did.
But there is this then now that we have this access to being so connected all the time. And you know, again, I'm not going to be touching on any new ground that people wouldn't be aware of here. But then with the other side of this, what I would call the shadow side of this is how do we disconnect?
Yeah.
And how do we do that? But that's probably for another time too.
It is. So the theme of what we want to talk about today is the absolute importance of continuing to engage in some learning as you go through the journey of life. And I would say to you, given the demographic of Hervey Bay, of people who, we have disproportionately more people over 55 in Hervey Bay than the state average or the national average. So then it's a trap. Like it becomes a possibility that you're going to retire and then you're going to go home and you're not going to learn anything more because you came from a generation where that wasn't really what you did. It's so vital for those people to not do that, you know, to remember that the more you grow, it's going to assist your longevity, your perception of the world around you. All of that changes if you engage in some active learning.
And we know that too, just keeping yourself mentally fit through, mental exercises, that learning and new things and stretching yourself is just so important, particularly when you leave a busy work environment and retire.
Yeah.
You've got to have some strategies where you do that, because it's just good, mental health and well-being. But there's so many more resources out there now. There's little, and this is not just, just for people that are sort of, semi-retired or not, not in the busy workplace that, you and I both are right now. It's for our employees at the moment right now, the access to small little micro learning units, the small little online, particularly online learning that can occur, formal and informal.
Yes.
It's just at our fingertips as well. It's a new world out there, and certainly since the pandemic, that's actually exploded in terms of people's understanding, use of, and ability to be able to go, actually, maybe I wouldn't have jumped that bridge, but I really needed to connect a lot more, and now we're able to do it so much more.
Well, that's expanding at what I'd call an exponential rate. Let me ask you an interesting question about the future of teaching, but when you think about the possibilities and scope of AI?
I think there's so many amazing opportunities that AI has presented to us now. So even now, how we're so familiar with just being able to do a search.
Yep.
And, and Google's been the company that, we even call it a Google search now, but it's a search, right?
We do call it a Google search.
I know. That is just so
they own it.
Company
they own
that,
it.
and it's so we can do a search. Lucky I'm not on the ABC right now, because we've probably said too many commercial. They would Google out a search. Absolutely. But now, how AI can actually refine that search so much more. A little example is simply, just a normal typed-in search. But if you're able to use AI to give them a little bit more background of what it really means behind those words, your search can be so much more refined. Right? That's just a great little example. Another one, I just did it with my IT department last week. There was a little script that we just put into an AI generator, then sampled my voice, and then my voice read back those words that weren't my words at all.
That's right.
And it sounded just like me.
Scary.
It's scary, but how awesome is that? I'm thinking of our next radio ad for our college. I won't necessarily need to engage with a production team to do it. I literally did it in 3.5 minutes in with my, my tech guys at school. How awesome is that? So what we need to know, and this is like anything, when the internet became something where we were able to access so more in our homes, we do need to know what's changed is, how do we use this responsibly and ethically?
Yes.
And to our advantage as human beings without, changing the moral landscape of our lives, because it has the potential for the shadow side. And I used that word before. There's negatives that it can bring, and people, I think, initially are a little bit, whenever something new comes a little bit along, can be focused on, we've got to watch out for that, or what about this? For us, and particularly in schools, it is something that we have to embrace, and we'll do. If we don't, it's at our detriment.
Okay. I'll give you an analogy, and then I'll ask if you have a similar one on as an educator and how you deal with it. So we frequently get cover letters and resumes from people who are looking for employment, and some of them are insanely well written.
Yeah.
So much to the point that even if we're not looking for someone, we might invite this person in because we're interested to find out about them. And then they come in, and the kindest way to say it is the curtains don't match the drapes.
Yeah.
So on your side of things, are kids turning in super assignments now that you go, Johnny, with respect?
Yeah. And you've encapsulated it perfectly there, where you've just said, Johnny, with respect. So this is the thing. We know our kids so well.
Yeah.
We know when it's been turned in with the assistance of AI.
Yeah.
So what you just said there is exactly what one of our teachers would say to a student. Hey, Johnny, let's have a chat.
But I said, like, this is like, I know that you're buoyed by the future of AI in education, but I think it's going to take that human element away from it.
Look, I think there are elements where it is challenging. So the scenario you gave me, absolutely. If you don't know the person, that you're not going to know how much of that is them. Writing that cover letter. In schools, that's why it's not as big a problem as think as it would be. Like with handing in assignments, you generally we know our students so well that if they handed in a piece of work that really was either plagiarized by the old terms of just cutting and pasting and lifting, or now with the advantage of AI, they can just do it quicker and with a little bit more finesse. They can say, make it sound a bit more like me, and they can add a little bit more in there. But again, gone are the days where it's just one assignment that we were able to assign a grade to, and there's a whole range of things. So whilst you could see that in a really large organisation, and if you've got lots of online learning programs and you're not connecting with the students like we do at our school, then there is a little bit of challenge, and there's going to have to be some things to put into place to help counteract that. The example of the resume coming, and it's certainly been written by someone else. We've got to look at ways now that we can deal with that, because that's just part of what they're going to be able to do.
It's going to become the norm.
But again, it comes back to then in schools, what's most important is we're teaching kids how to be ethical. How to look at things and analyze them and critique them and go, actually, this doesn't sound like it's true, even though it looks like that person, it sounds like that person, and that person would actually say something like that. It still may not be true, because now the way that you can do deep fakes is so easy. So we've got to be able to teach our kids and our young people to be critical, to be intelligent, and ultimately it comes back to our job is to teach people how to be more human.
I think as the further I go down on the journey of life, that the greatest skill that you can learn is critical thinking. And be able to assess things, and not everything is as it seems. And if you have that innate ability to be able to do that, and I don't think you always need to have it, you can learn it through positive or negative experiences. You'll come down on judgment calls on the right side of thing more often than you won't. And if I'm picking up on what you're describing, that these are some of the fundamentals that you're trying to teach children as they go through school, that there are different arguments to every case, and you can look at things on its merits. And you're in a supportive educational environment where we have the opportunity to listen to your views and you to make assessments on things.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think coming back to, learning for life and looking at our community here in Hervey Bay, the question about AI, there's so many things that AI is going to bring to people that haven't grown up with it, that's going to assist them become learners in ways that have not been able to. So even that example of AI and how schools are dealing with it, how are we dealing it, for people who haven't had a lot of familiarity with the internet, it's actually going to be able to help them so much more.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it'll be a significant disruptor to certain industries down the track, and I think education could be right in the crosshairs. In terms of, you turn on the screen and Virtual Mary is there teaching the class today. I think that's a real possibility, but it's hard to tell because it's such a moving feast.
It is, and we're learning more, and it's been something that's been available, but only on more of a paid platform up until recent years, and now it's just becoming more ubiquitous and accessible for all. And I think that's just been a great thing for us to be able to look at it. And some places we've had to move more agilely and go, right, what does this mean now, and how are we going to assess this, and what are we going to do as a result of it? But that's happened before, and it'll happen again in education, and that's a great thing. And it's an example of how we always too at St. James, we say to our staff, how are we always learning too? Because if we're not, it's our core. And that's what I love about my job and my role too, is that in adults, in adult land, we're also learning as well. It's not just the kids learning, it's us, and we've always been, using that as an example.
So I'd make an educated assessment that the majority of people who watch this podcast on YouTube will be a little bit older and are thinking about, okay, well, I would like to learn some more stuff. Are there a couple of pillars that you would say to people, listen, if you want to start learning a little bit later in life, how about you do it this way? How about you engage in things like from this angle? What sort of advice would you give to people?
one of the things is to not try, if possible, not do it in isolation. So it's easy, if just to jump in your office and jump onto YouTube and start listening and doing it, and that's great. But if you're able to connect with the community and say, hey, can we get together and do this? That classic, and have a bit of a reflection and talk about it, because you've got to be careful too not to get caught up in echo chambers and not just hear one point of view. And it comes back to this critical piece. You can get caught up in a group or a community that's very isolating if you're not careful about it. And so trying to put yourself in the room with diverse people, people with different views, and be challenged by that would be one of the key things I'd say. Get around and amongst people. And of course you want to get to people that are like-minded, but also be careful too when you're learning and looking at new things that you maybe get called to account, or have people there that might go, is that really true? Yeah, that's going on. That's one of the awesome things about learning, is you can reflect on it and hear other people and be open to other people's views and thoughts.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that's why, like in Hervey Bay, we have a disproportionate level of volunteers than we do in other communities that are of a similar size. And I think a part of the attraction of that is the human connection that they get being with other people, but then they learn from other people. Like it's a bit of monkey see, monkey do. Yeah. And I go, okay, well, I'm at least open-minded enough to take on different points of view.
And an example, being open-minded is really good.
Yeah.
And one of the things, the further step from that is to be curious about things. So when you hear something, when something's said, when a statement's been made, or you learn something, you think, I'm wondering if you can be curious. So, ask another question. What does that mean for me right now? Or have a think about how you might be thinking, it should be done this way. Why did I think that? Is it because I grew up and my dad did that? Or when we grew up, we didn't have much money, therefore I don't want to be as generous now. There's a reason why we make the decisions we do, but it's really good to keep asking that question about why we do that. And what we do, or if we hear something, ask a little bit more. Why'd you say that, Malcolm? Oh, I'm curious, I wonder why. And that's a really good sort of way to continue to be learning.
And the intangible part about that, or at least my assessment of it, is that what's said to me I'll absorb that differently to the next person.
Yeah.
The next person.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, perfect. Okay, so everyone who comes along to the LiveWell podcast series has the opportunity to receive a donation from us, so we're giving up their valuable time. What would you like to do with that?
Oh, Malcolm, thank you. And I know you reached out to me prior to this to say have a bit of a think about it. And I know I said that back in response to you, but wow, thank you so much for that generosity. I think that's just, fantastic. So we work with an organisation called Australian Lutheran World Service, ALWS. And they're a service organisation, the charity arm of the Lutheran Church of Australia, and they work with people generally in overseas organisations. They partner with overseas organisations to support significantly disadvantaged groups and communities.
Yes.
Not just in our local Southeast Asia region, but right around the globe. And so at the moment, they've got a campaign on working with the many thousands of people displaced in Ukraine. It's been 2 years since the invasion
I heard
there.
That the other day. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's right. And just some of the, we kind of, probably because what's happening in the Middle East right now, we've kind of forgotten about Russia and the Ukraine a little bit. But this is challenging. There's a lot of other places around the world that are, have so many people that are displaced, and generally it is through either people being displaced or in really impoverished countries like Cambodia. Yes. So Australian Lutheran World Service work in those places. And one of the awesome things about Australian Lutheran World Service is you may not have heard about them as much because they are an organisation that don't spend a lot of money on big advertisements, during the cricket or the Australian Open tennis, which is awesome that organisations are able to sometimes do that because awareness is really good, and then they can pull big audiences to support their charity. But about 85 cents out of every donated dollar goes to the projects.
I was about to say
of what they're going to do.
Those other organisations have incredibly high administration.
Possibly
fees.
so, yeah. And again, I think the efficiency of Australian Lutheran World Service is great too. That space and being able, they're a nimble organisation. They're light on, but they work really well, and they do have Australian government backing as well. So there's a matching there that the Australian government does as well for the dollars. And I don't know the figures in front of me, but there's matching there as well. So great great, wonderful organisation to be able to support those that really need it.
Perfect. We're happy to do it. Now, tell me something. If you could go back to your younger self, what's a piece of advice that you would give them?
Oh, I should have been prepared for a question like this.
That's why I don't give out questions when people ask me.
Yeah.
I'll give you an easy one if you want to think about it.
I think it might surprise you, but I wasn't that confident at public speaking.
Really?
And probably for many years, I didn't take up the opportunity of things like I'm doing with you right now.
Sure.
And so I'd say to my younger self, Luke, hey, just get out there, pick up the microphone and be confident about what you have to say, because probably I held back on sharing lots of things and it was probably a good thing. But I really enjoyed just engaging and chatting with people, and I thoroughly enjoyed the last, 40 minutes or 30 minutes of whatever it's been. And probably a younger self didn't jump or lean into that as much as I could have. And this gives me, a lot of enjoyment.
I know you fancy yourself as a bit of a closet Gordon Ramsay. So what's the last gourmet meal that you cooked at home? You just looked at that and said, man, that's Master Chef.
Well, do you know what? Just the other night, there's a dish called Marry Me Chicken. And it's really kind of super simple. But I just threw a few extra sun-dried tomatoes in there and just some extra fresh herbs from the garden, and it lifted the dish beautifully. So whilst it wasn't a gourmet dish per se, it was more of a quick weeknight dish. The sort of the umami flavour of the sun-dried tomatoes nailed it.
When I have nothing else to do on a Saturday, I just like to do this. What is it?
Look at a recipe book and decide what I'm going to cook the following night.
That right?
Yeah, I love it.
You need to scratch that itch and get on a cooking show.
I got to say, another question is, if I'm going to ask a question on your behalf, what do you keep buying that you shouldn't? And it's recipe books.
Oh, true.
I just love buying them, and so I've actually got some recipe books on my shelf that I have not even opened, but I bought them, but I've got them there and I will one day, but it's just a little bit of a thing I've got to get under control.
Listen, I don't think judging yourself is important. You keep going, pal. Last question. You're down to your last $10.
Awesome.
What are you going to spend it on?
What can you get for $10 now? Okay, so talking a little bit about being a bit of an underground foodie, sometimes I just love a crumbed sausage. So 2 crumb sausages. How bad's that? I know. This is like confession time on air. This is really bad.
Are they even legal? Are they illegal in this country?
I know. It is terrible. Anyway.
Let's see if that makes it into the final.
Yeah, we will see.
Thanks, Luke. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Hey, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Cheers, Matt.
Bye.